In the insanely competitive world of biopharmaceuticals, innovation is pretty much everything. But what happens after that big aha moment? Well, today, we're going to talk about building a fortress, a digital, legal, and ethical fortress to protect a biopharma company's most vital asset. First things first, let's talk about what's really at stake here.
Think about it. Behind every potential new drug, you're looking at millions, sometimes billions of dollars, and, often a decade or more of painstaking research. This is a massive, high-stakes gamble. And all of that value? It all boils down to one single, absolutely critical thing.
So, what is that thing? What's the single most precious asset that all this time and money goes into creating? Is it the patent? Maybe the fancy new lab? Or the brilliant scientists on the team?
Nope. It's the data. That's it. The clinical trial data is the absolute backbone of the entire operation. It isn't just a bunch of numbers. It is the definitive proof that a new therapy is safe and that it actually works. Seriously, without that data, everything else is pretty much worthless.
Yeah, you should really think of this data as the crown jewels of the company. It's the hard-earned evidence that's the difference between a cool idea in a lab and a drug that's actually approved, on the market, and saving lives. This data is what you show to regulators, to investors, to partners. Its integrity is everything.
Okay, so how do you actually protect these crown jewels? Well, your first line of defense is a legal fortress. And I don't mean just one wall. We're talking about a complex, layered system of laws and IP strategies, all designed to keep your data locked down.
Inside that legal fortress, you've got two main weapons in your arsenal: patents and trade secrets. And they do very different jobs. A patent protects the invention itself, like a new molecule, but it means you have to publicly share how it works. A trade secret, on the other hand, protects your proprietary info, like a unique method you use to analyze patient data. It can last forever, as long as you keep it a secret. The really smart play? You use both.
And it's not just about protecting your own stuff. You also have to navigate this whole web of regulations that protect patient data. You've got HIPAA in the US, the super powerful GDPR in the EU, and when you're running trials all over the world, it's a complicated mess of international laws. And look, compliance here isn't a nice to have, it's your fundamental license to even be in this business.
Okay, so legal walls are crucial, right? But they're not going to stop a hacker. So let's talk about your active defense system, the digital shield. In an age where cyber threats are everywhere, this is all about the tech and the protocols that are standing guard 24/7.
A really solid security plan basically comes down to a few key things. First, encryption. This is totally non-negotiable. It makes your data unreadable, whether it's just sitting in a database or flying across a network. Second, how you store and move that data has to be rock solid. And finally, remember, this isn't a set it and forget it kind of deal. You need to be doing regular audits to find and fix weak spots before someone else does. You have to be constantly vigilant, because believe me, the threats are always evolving.
But a fortress without a conscience? That's really just a prison. And that brings us to maybe the most important layer of our defense, the ethical compass. This is about making sure our whole data protection strategy is guided by a real sense of responsibility.
And this is where it gets really tricky. On one hand, you've got to protect your company's confidential data to stay competitive. But on the other hand, you have this moral duty to share findings that could impact public health, especially when it comes to drug safety. Walking that tightrope? It's one of the hardest and most important things a biopharma company has to do.
And right at the very heart of all this ethics talk is something called informed consent. Now, this is so much more than just a checkbox on a form. It's really a sacred trust between you and the patient. It's about making sure people totally understand what they're signing up for and respecting their privacy above all else. Okay, so we've talked about all these layers: legal, digital, ethical. And you might be thinking, wow, that sounds like a massive headache. But I want you to try and see it a different way. Because a truly world-class data protection strategy, it's not just about defense. It's a powerful competitive advantage. Here, look at it this way. Just meeting the basic compliance rules, that's the bare minimum. That's the floor. But when you get proactive, when you go above and beyond, that's where you start building some serious value. You gain investor confidence, you build real trust with patients, and that makes you a way more attractive partner for big collaborations. It makes you stand out.
So how do you make sure this fortress you've built stays strong for years to come? Well, you have to stay on top of ever-changing laws. You have to innovate with new tech like AI or blockchain. And this is critical. You have to build a culture where every single person in the company knows they play a role in protecting data. The key takeaway here is that this is a living, breathing strategy, not some dusty binder on a shelf.
So I'll leave you with this one final question to think about. Look at your own data protection efforts. Are they just a cost center, something you have to do? Or are you treating them like what they really are? Your single most powerful strategic investment in your company's future?